Good evening, children. Welcome to AIMS India live session biology. What is science? So, from the past 2 days, we are discussing about the science, how it will explain how to study the science subject, how the term science arrived, and yesterday about the scientific method. What is scientific method? What are the steps in the scientific method? How to follow the scientific method? How it is useful in day-to-day life? We have studied. So let us proceed further. Today we are going to discuss about life skills, which are very important to attain success in the life. So let us briefly recall. How do scientists answer a question or solve a problem they have identified? So for that, they use organized ways called scientific methods to plan and conduct a study. Which method they followed? They followed scientific methods. They use science process skills to help them gather, organize, analyze, and present their information. They use science process skills to help them to gather, to organize, to analyze, and present their information. So these are the process skills. Main process skills are observation or observing, measuring, classifying, inferring, predicting, communicating. All these process skills, most of these process skills are useful in science. So science process skills we are going to discuss today. So investigation, in the process of investigation, after experimentation, the final thing, what is the conclusion? If your hypothesis is correct, then you may want to pose another question about your topic that you can test. Or if your hypothesis is incorrect, what you will do? You may want to form another hypothesis and do a test of different variables. Okay, like that you have to think. So to take the decisions and to do the process perfectly, these science process skills are useful. The first one, observe. Use the senses to learn about objects and events. So you have to use the senses, means sense organs. Either you have to see it, or you have to smell it, you have to touch it, or you have to feel it. Okay, all the senses, whichever the possible senses required, you have to use them in observing that is called keen observation, is the first process skill. So to use your senses to gather and record information about an object or event. So whatever you observe, you have to record it, that information about that object or event. Next, compare. Another important process skill. Identify characteristics of things or events to find out how they are alike and different. So you will be knowing the difference only when you compare, whether they are similar. Okay, the situations also, in some area, some location, you have observed something. The same object or the same event, if you see in another angle, in another place, then you will be noticing some differences. Okay, to find the difference or whether it is alike or different, this skill, comparing skill is useful. Next, classify. It is another very, very important process skill. Group or organize objects or events in categories based on specific characteristic. So, if you have observed or noticed several objects, so you have to categorize those objects or classify those objects or divide those objects depending upon their similarities. You have to keep, you have to segregate. Okay. So here the 5 senses: sight, touch, hearing, smell, taste. These are the 5 main senses. So out of which at least 2 to 3 senses you have to utilize in observing the objects. Okay. Right. Next, after classifying, the next process skill which is very interesting: measure. Compare an attribute of an object such as mass, length, or capacity to a unit of measure such as gram, centimeter, or liter. Measuring. So, what is measuring? Measuring is nothing but making observations that can be stated in numbers. Whatever you observe, that you have to put it on the paper in the form of numbers. So 5 centimeters, 10 centimeters, or 10 grams, 100 grams, okay, or in kilograms, or in kilometers, or liters, like that. Depending upon the requirement, depending upon the situation and the topic which you have selected. So which is possible unit you have to select first, and then accordingly you have to proceed. Next, in the measuring, gather, record, display, and interpret data. These are the steps are there. First, gathering, then you have to record, then you have to display and interpret data. Interpreting means you have to match the data, what you have collected, how they are correlated to each other. So that is called interpretation. Then first gather. Gather data by making observations that will be useful for inferences or predictions. You have to collect the data such that your observations will be useful for results or at least predictions. Yes, so and so you can expect. Next, after gathering data, record data. Record data by writing the observations in a tabular form or a graph or in the notebook. So, whichever the easy method to remember, you have to choose and you have to make the observation in the form of a note, in the form of a table or a graph or notebook. Next, display data. So after recording data, you have to display. By making tables, charts or graphs, you can display the collected data. So like this, so for example, here I am making a balance. Okay, so you have to see the accuracy is important. Then in grams you are taking, here weight you are taking means in grams or in kilograms you have to take. Okay. Making tables, charts or graphs are useful to analyze the data easily. So last one is interpret data. Interpretation by drawing conclusions about what the data shows. So you have done measurement, the process skill. So first you have compared the objects. In that comparison, you have selected if any object or a stone you have taken. So you have to measure mass. Okay, then you have to select the length of that, the capacity to a unit. If you are taking some liquid, volume you have to measure, that is in liters. Okay, length in centimeters, meters. So depending upon the uh, what you want to measure, so that unit you have to select, and such devices you have to select. For measuring length, you can use a scale, you can use a tape with measurements on it, marked on it. Okay? Or if for example, if you are measuring a liquid, then measuring jars you can take. Measuring jars are there in liters. Okay. Then in ml also, in small quantities you are measuring in ml. Okay, in small quantities you are measuring the weight, micrograms. Okay, like that, depending upon the requirement, possibility, you have to select the right unit of measurement. Okay, so measure is a process skill involved in the scientific method of studying. Next, another process skill, use a model. This is very important process skill. Whenever you are even to make a representation to help you understand an idea, an object or an event, such as how something works, you need a model. Okay, by seeing the model you can easily understand. So in order to give strength to your observations or your experiment, you need to use a model. Okay, children, using a model is very common. Okay, so you will get a complete idea by using the model, and that model may be an object or an event. How to understand how that something works, you need to use a model. For example, one volcano, how it works in your general science exhibitions or science fairs or edu fair. So your friend used a model of volcano. So in that some soda and some chemicals they will add. So you will see the lava is coming out like so that model represents the, a model is not a exact same, but it is a replica of the original. Okay. Then predict, form an idea of an expected outcome based on observations or experiences. To predict, whenever these process skills, you must be very conscious when you are doing anything. This is nothing but learning by doing, learning by experimentation, learning by experience. So in order to experience the that concept, compulsory your consciousness is very important. So prediction means you have to frame an idea of an expected outcome. Yes, what is going to give out. Okay, based on observations, you have to predict the result. Okay, it is a good experience. By doing several experiments, you will easily predict the results of that experiment. The same model experiment you are doing another, then easily you can predict the results. Last one, infer. Infer means conclusion. Use logical reasoning to explain events and draw conclusions based on observation. Inference means nothing but conclusion. Yes, what is the process you have done so far, and what is the final climax, it is the, what is the result, it is called infer. You have to use your logical reasoning. So you must be in a position to explain the conclusion properly. So first you have framed the question, now the answer has come out. So it must match, it should support your experiment. Okay. So this is the infer is a very important process skill. So it need some communicating skill is required to how you explain the result. Okay, here one model just now we discussed, volcano. Volcano model is prepared with clay. Then in that baking soda and vinegar is added. When baking soda and vinegar chemical reaction takes place, and that fluid oozes out, just like some color is added, so that it represent it appears like lava, red color. It will oozes out from the mouth of the volcano. Okay? So using a model will really help to understand the concept properly. So it is a important process skill. Okay, children, use a model, predict, infer. These are the three important process skills. Next process skill, hypothesize. How to hypothesize? So first observation, then you have to hypothesize. What is hypothesis? Make a statement about an expected outcome. So now inference, the result has come. So make a statement about an expected outcome. That statement, making statement is called as hypothesis. Okay. So it may be stated in one statement or group of statements which give complete meaning. So that process skill is called hypothesize. Next, plan and conduct experiment. Plan and conduct experiment. This is another process skill. Identify and perform the steps necessary to test a hypothesis using appropriate tools, recording and analyzing the data collected. So it is very important. So once again, you have to plan and conduct the experiment. First, you have to identify and perform the steps necessary to test that hypothesis. Then to test that hypothesis, what is required? In planning, you have to segregate the tools. You have to arrange equipment, tools, recording facility you have to create, and to analyze the data. Okay, you have to analyze the data which is collected. So for that also, what is required? Everything. So that is called plan and conduct experiment. Okay, in order to conduct experiment, you must be pre-planned. Next, control variables. So in any experiment, the variables are very, very important. These variables may be single or independent variables. Okay, like the different variables are there, control variables. So identify and control factors that affect the outcome of an experiment so that only one variable in a test. So at a time, 5 or 6 things you want to do, your experiment may fail. Only one variable which you are going to test, so that you have to supervise, that you have to identify. Identification of that variable which is going to be tested in the experiment is very, very important. That is called control variable. So here experimenting, a way to test a hypothesis. So these are the equipment. So plan and conduct experiment. So what is required here? Here beaker, a spirit lamp, okay, measuring jar, chemicals, everything is ready. Then only after planning, you have to start the experiment. During the experiment, you have to control variables. Okay, first hypothesize, then plan and conduct experiment. In the planning, all requirements you have to obtain, then start the procedure, and during the procedure you have to control the variables. Then you will get exact result. Finally, once again, let us refresh scientific method. What is scientific method? The scientific method is an ongoing process. Make observations. What do I see in nature? This can be from one's own experiences. It may be the thoughts or reading. Next, think of interesting questions. Why does that pattern occur? A question. Next, formulate hypothesis. Formulate hypothesis. What are the general causes of phenomenon I am wondering about? Like that, you have to formulate the hypothesis. Then, develop testable predictions. If my hypothesis is correct, then I can expect A, B, C. Like that, you have to predict. Okay? Prediction is very, very important. Develop testable predictions. Then, from that predictions, gather data to test the predictions. You have to gather the data to test your predictions. How? The relevant data can come from the literature, new observations, or formal experiments. Thorough testing requires replication to verify results. Okay? Your experiment should be very accurate. So, in order to do that, what you have to do? You have to refine. You have to alter. You have to expand. Or if it is not possible, either you must be in a position or ready to reject the hypothesis also if it is not accurate. Okay, reject the hypothesis. And finally, develop general theories. General theories must be consistent with most or all available data and with other current theories. It is very, very important. Okay, so when finally after that, once again making observations. So children, when scientists try to find an answer to a question, what they do an experiment. For doing that experiment, what they will do? They use thinking tools. Those thinking tools which we have discussed now. What are they? Process skills. They are called process skills. So, you use many of the process skills whenever you speak, whenever you listen, or whenever you read, write, or think. Process skills are useful in doing all these activities which help to gain the knowledge. Think. Think about how these process skills are useful. The skills to help to answer the questions. Okay. So what are the process skills we have studied today? Once again, finally, observe, compare, classify, measure. In the measure, gathering, record data, display data, and interpret data. And also, next process skill what you have studied, hypothesize, plan, and conduct experiment, control variables. These are all the process skills which we have studied. Use a model, then predict, infer. So these are all the process skills which we have studied today. So read textbook, and so many illustrations are given. You can take one example and apply all these process skills, then you will follow. Okay, so let us test ourselves how much we have learned today, how much knowledge you have gained today. Today, quiz number 3. When a scientist shares her findings with other scientists, she is having which process skill? Making a hypothesis, communicating results, analyzing data, experimenting. Those who are in live chat, please answer the question, children. When a scientist shares her findings with other scientists or fellow scientists, she is having which process skill? Yes. What is that skill? Communicating skill. Communicating skill. Okay. The answer is B. Very good. Next. In science, an educated guess is called A. An question, conclusion, hypothesis, observation. In science, an educated guess is called what? Yes? Guess your answer. Very good. It's a hypothesis. In science, an educated guess is called a hypothesis. Next question. In an experiment, the factor that we measure is called dependent variable, controlled variable, independent variable, and conclusion. In an experiment, the factor that we measure. So, we discussed in an experiment, variables are very, very important. At a time, we can't test all the variables. So, you have to select a variable and you have to measure that variable. That variable is called, very good, dependent variable, the variable which we are going to test. Next. In an experiment, the one variable that is changed is called, the one variable that is changed, controlled variable, dependent variable, independent variable, experimental variable. Those who are in live chat, please answer the question. Question number 4. Yes? Independent variable. Because here, the one variable that is changed, so that is different from remaining. So, independent variable. Next. Which of the following is not a rule when writing a hypothesis? It is testable, it is a prediction, it is an if-then statement, it should restate the question. Here the question is, which is not a rule when writing a hypothesis? Okay, that is D. It should restate the question. It is not there in the writing hypothesis. Okay, our hypothesis should not restate the question. Next. Question number 6. The process of obtaining information by using the senses is called scientific method, observation, conclusion, inquiry. The process of obtaining information by using the senses is called, very good, observation. B. Observation helps in obtaining the information. Information is wealth. Gathering information, then only you can start anything. Next. When you decide whether or not the data supports the original hypothesis, you are having which skill? Drawing conclusion, asking questions, forming a hypothesis, making observations. When you decide whether or not the data supports the original hypothesis, then you are drawing conclusion. Whether or not the data supports the original hypothesis, you are in the conclusion. So, drawing conclusion. D. A is the correct answer. 7th question, A. Next. When a scientist shares her findings with other scientists, is repeated this question, making hypothesis, communicating results, analyzing data. Okay, here, communicating results. Next, if you were measuring the mass of a fly, you should use, okay, in measuring, we are using different units, grams, liter, meter, kilogram. So here a fly, what is the unit of measurement here? Yes, A is the correct answer because it is small, in grams. If you wanted to know volume of water in a bottle of soda, you would use grams, liters, kiloliters or milliliters. Yes, very simple, liters. Okay, B is the correct answer. Next, if you wanted to measure the distance here to Salt Lake City, you would use kilometers, meters, centimeters, millimeters. If you wanted to measure the distance from here to Salt Lake City, how would you measure? By using which units? What is the correct answer? Very simple. Kilometers, because it's a long distance, so in kilometers. A is the correct answer. In which step of the scientific method do we want to use graphs? Asking questions, communicate results, analyze data, make a hypothesis. In a scientific method, when we use graph. Yes? What is the right answer? Analyze data. At the time of analyzing the data, you will use graphs. Okay. So these graphs are of different types, bar graphs, pictogram graphs, or pie chart. Like that, the different comparative, when you are comparing the data and analyzing the data, we need to use some tool. The tool is a graph. A scientific procedure undertaken to make a discovery, test a hypothesis, or demonstrate a known fact is lab, experiment, hypothesis, theory. So a scientific procedure undertaken to make a discovery, test a hypothesis, or demonstrate a known fact. What it is called, children? What we have studied all these days? 2 days. Yes. Experiment. B. Okay. In order to perform experiment, first observation, then hypothesis. Okay. Then you have to follow the procedure, then get the results, then conclusion or inference. Next. So today's last question. A series of steps followed to solve a problem is experimental guidelines, scientific method, investigations, standard procedures. So it's the last question. A series of steps followed to solve the problems is very simple, which we have studied. The scientific method. Very good. Most of you answered B only. Scientific method. Okay, children. So plan to investigate. In order to plan to investigate, you need to plan a test to find out how the process proceeds. Okay? And then you have to hypothesize, and you have to plan and conduct the experiment. Then during the experiment, you have to control the variables by making sure exactly how much it is required, what is the procedure exactly. If you follow, then you can control the variables. Okay? So with the help of your subject teacher in the science laboratory, you can perform the experiments by following life skills. These life skills are useful in day-to-day life. The knowledge which you are gaining, so you have to apply. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe our channel. Press the bell icon for receiving latest updates.